Greetings from the satellite of Buzz, high above the earth. We've got two great episodes of Mystery Science Theater 3000 to talk about today. We've got Cry Wilderness, and we've got Time Travels, but most importantly, we've got Movie Sign.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
And there it is, the song that's been stuck in Andrew Mena's head for the last 8 days now. Can't help it. You just can't get it out. Welcome to the Mystery Science Theater 3000 after show. As I said, we are indeed stranded on the satellite of Buzz. I'm Christian Bladt on Twitter and the Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And breaking out the robot, and that dance is not necessarily the robot, but you know what? Robots can do so many dances these days that the robot is actually kind of insulting.
It's true. You know, robots are much more capable than we give them.
As we see in these two episodes, which we'll get to, robots can actually do a lot these days.
Do so much.
Andrew Mena,
Hey!
Andrew Mena.
I'm Andrew Mena, everyone. You can find me at Andrew Mena on Twitter, at the Andrew Mena on Instagram, or on just the internet if you Google my name.
And are you also AndrewMena.com?
I am actually squarespace.com/Andrew Mena or something to that effect. But if you do the Googling, it'll come up easy
And also
enough.
Andrew Mena LLC.
Ooh.
Yeah, you didn't know that.
I didn't. You registered that for me.
Yeah, I did that
Thank
for you.
you.
And don't forget that the show itself, our show, has at MST3KABTV. You can tweet us there if you're not watching live. But if you are watching live, join us in the YouTube chat where we had some lovely visitors last week. And of course, we are going to start off. We got to tie up a couple things from last week.
Got some teas.
Yes,
Cross
very
some
first
eyes.
thing. Matthew Rappelt writes in, the island of Sodor is the island that Thomas the Tank Engine is set in. It's all made of models like many of the exterior scenes in Reptilicus. This was something that had just come up in my personal life, my secret identity life. Someone was talking about Thomas the Tank Engine. They used that reference, but it didn't stick with me when you were trying to figure out what it was.
Wow.
If my son were a little bit older, I would know everything about those trains and the island they come from, and how there's apparently like 80 trains, and every different story, he meets a new train. And of course, that's a train you have to buy your kid, because otherwise you're a bad parent.
That makes sense.
So thank you so much, Matthew, not just for watching, but for answering the important questions. And it was actually right there in the credits. Felicia Day's character is Kinga, or just Kinga Forrester. I think I had a little too hard G there. Kinga. That's the son of Clayton Forrester and granddaughter of Pearl Forrester. But I knew what her last name was, but I felt like they just didn't say it. I just needed to read the credits. That's really what it came down to.
It all comes down to reading.
So, yeah, reading is fundamental.
Reading comprehension, you guys.
And here's the thing. Before we dive into this episode, I forgot. I actually had a criticism of episode 1101.
Go on.
Reptilicus. There was the scene with multiple Tom Servos, which was a very funny scene.
Yes.
I thought that was a great moment where we could have had voice cameos from Kevin Murphy and or Josh Weinstein.
Ah, yeah.
Little throwback to the old days, but something that I can very easily look past, considering some of the things we have to talk about in this episode. But I just felt like it was a missed opportunity. But you know what?
You're right.
Very
really fun.
Very minor criticism.
Yes.
And it did not take away from my enjoyment of Reptilicus. But we do have two episodes to discuss this week, so we got to get right down to it. The first, episode 1102, Cry Wilderness. It started off with like a nice little cold open, which I like that this show's doing that. They don't dive right into the theme song.
Yeah,
I kind of like that gimmick that Jonah
he has to reenact it every time?
That he gets
Yes.
sucked up into a tube and he has to reenact it every time.
I also enjoy that.
And I like getting to interact with Gypsy more, like we saw in that episode at the beginning there. And he makes a reference to something about why he needs to act it out every time. Jonah does. He says the liquid technology can't record. And I'll refer back to that in a moment. It was a fun... Oh, yes.
I was just going to say, he also invents the turkey theremin at the beginning
I was going to mention the turkey theremin.
Good.
Which, the theremin is a fascinating instrument.
Quite.
I don't know who in our listenership/viewership has ever seen someone use a theremin. I have... There's this band called Fishbone. It's a band from California. They've been around for about 30 years. They went through a theremin stage. And most of the guys in the band hated it, but the singer Angelo Moore loved it. So he would do a lot of, and for people listening, they're not going to see, but it's a lot of like just really, wild hand movements just to make the theremin.
He's going for it,
and he's going for it, and it's like it's kind of cool the way it works. No real practical application of the theremin until we get the turkey theremin.
I mean, and now we have the real the death throes that we can hear in real time.
But then you see, then there's the problem as referenced. It's like, well, it sounds like I'm murdering my turkey, but he's already dead.
Delicious.
The other half of the invention exchange was a very important moment for me. My wife was listening in the other room, and when she saw this, she came in and said, did you write that, or did they write that just for you? And that's something we talk a lot about on the show. There's moments that we feel like are just for us. But the Carvel ice cream cake clock, that first of all revolves around Fudgy the Whale, who is referred to as patient zero of the Carvel cake-demic. Fudgy the Whale and the Santa Claus cake, they're just sideways cakes. And I know that Carvel is somewhat of a national brand. They're very popular where I grew up in New York. And, you know, there's a lot of, that's where you get ice cream. There are these awful commercials that are voiced by the guy who founded Carvel named Tom Carvel. But it's all very endearing, and it's a huge part of my childhood. And it's a great cake, the Fudgy the Whale. Have you ever had a Fudgy the Whale cake?
I've seen the shape.
Okay.
I have not had that.
Never had that cake. See, it's good. You know what?
It.
We'll have something to celebrate.
Hard to get it in space.
Yeah, well, you know what? We can have somebody send it up through a tube.
Sweet.
Hopefully.
I love those tubes.
So that was very exciting. That it was a bunch of these different cakes that use that same shape.
Delightful.
And if Cambot, if you can bring up that link that I sent to you, I beamed down to the control room. There is actually a notification on Twitter, a little shout out, and we'll show that to the audience, that the money bag cake, because kids love money bags, is actually something that they made. I don't know that you can go into the store and buy it, but they did make one, and they tweeted it at Mystery Science Theater and said thanks for the shout out.
Amazing.
Joel Hodgson himself retweeted it and thanked them. So, but God, that cake looks delicious. And the money looks pretty tasty too.
A delicious money bag.
Yeah.
Are those edible money bits, or are those just monies?
I'm pretty sure that's just money.
Yeah.
But who am I to say it's not edible?
You have no right.
Yeah. So anyway, and it's so funny because in our first episode last week, I talked about that there was a running Fudgy the Whale joke, and I was like, oh my God, Carvel jokes, that's right up my alley. And then we get a whole,
And here we are.
we get props. Now, the liquid technology reference was,
Yes.
it was very oddly edited. There was a little like, bloop, 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 like little underwater effects because they had to edit. And I think part of the charm of the show is that it's usually not edited. So I would assume it was just such a massive prop that it didn't work right, and they had to do multiple takes. But I don't know, maybe a cutaway of Fudgy. I was very distracted by that editing move, but I was so in love with those cakes that I couldn't stay mad for long.
That's fair.
Did you notice that they did the little bubble thing? Or
Yeah, I noticed the bubbles. I thought it was just an effect. I didn't really notice the edit
Yeah.
or the cut. I
Well-
was just like, oh yeah, there's bubbles. We're recording on liquid. Sure.
Sure. Well, I rewatched
Sign
it.
me up. Yep.
Not just because the bubbles, maybe I wanted to see some of those cakes again.
Yeah.
But in any case, so, again, minor criticisms. But, we have to be at least slightly impartial.
Right.
But it's funny because there are not a lot of moments that you feel that there's editing in the show. There's, not really blown lines, but lines that were clearly not read directly. And some of the, there was a
Yeah.
moment that Jonah said the wrong word in a host segment and then just corrected himself.
Yeah, in this last third episode.
Yeah, in a lot of shows, they'll be like, nope, can't have
Do
that.
it
They're
again.
just like,
I
nah.
actually thought it was very charming.
Yeah, I like that because it's more like they're putting on a little play. They're
Yeah.
putting on a stage show.
Yes.
And
it remains charming, I
yeah,
feel.
I mean, I think if something goes terribly wrong, they're probably, they'll do another take. But just roll with it. That's what I like to say. All right.
like it too.
Anyway, before we dive into the movie, before we cry wilderness, let's talk about some of the host segments in that episode. One of the
so
things
fun.
that I liked was before they did the bit where Crow and Tom Servo were dressed up like raccoons.
Yeah.
We see them putting the raccoon costumes on in the movie theater. So in that moment, I'm like, well, what the hell are they doing? And then they come out dressed like raccoons. I'm like, all right.
There it is.
And I just I don't know. It's not something that they ever did in the old show, but it was just like a nice little touch.
Yeah.
And by the way, raccoon Tom Servo, adorable.
So fun.
I would bring him home. I'd get him his rabies shots, but I would definitely bring him home.
Yeah, well, rabies shots.
Raccoon Crow, no. He
Not
can
as much?
live out in the trash can, but
Seems a little more violent.
yeah, I'm not down with that.
That's fair.
But I love when they act out scenes from the movies and some of the ridiculous characters.
Oh, me too.
And obviously, just there was so much laughing in the movie, which we'll talk about the movie, but you can't comment on the movie as the host without that. And there was also a fun thing about making a spacesuit, and then that leads to the scale model. I love the scale models. We had that also in the first episode, with the monster song. And anytime that they want to do scale models of all of these ridiculous characters and everything,
I'm in.
Just the amount of time that takes, like, it's not like building, a model of the Ewok village and an AT-AT like stepping on it. That takes months. This still takes like days probably to make all that stuff.
Absolutely, these aren't Legos.
But they could be.
I mean, but they should be.
Yeah, where is the MST3K Lego set, by the way?
Lego Corp, where you at?
Yeah. Hey, Lego Corp.
Yeah, quit falling asleep at the wheel here.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so what are some of your thoughts there about the host segments in this episode?
Gosh, I mean, I really like the host segments, and I feel like they come at really opportune times. I think that there were 4 during this one.
Yes, I'm saving one in particular with some surprise guests that were in it for a moment. But
and we'll talk about them too in a minute, but I just felt like they were all of the bits just come at this really perfect time. They give you a break right when you need a break.
Yeah. It's usually right about like, I'm kind of tired with what's going on here. And,
we talked a little bit outside about this, but I want to talk about it now. But the quality of these 2 movies together, number 2 and number 3, they vary a little bit.
There's just a little disparity.
And as bad as 2 is, it's really bad. Cry Wilderness is not a good movie by any means, but I think it's fascinatingly bad. You know what I mean? In a way that the third one, the time travel one, was just kind of a less like bad in a way that was harder to watch. I felt.
Right. Yeah. This was very charming bad, where it's like they reference the incomplete Bigfoot costume.
All of the stock footage.
Hey, we'll give you some gloves in the sequel. They said at one point. Yeah, the stock footage that wasn't just stock footage. It was like some of it was stock footage from television that was spliced in.
Effects,
yeah, and I'm not quite sure what that served, and I love the fact that they would just come up on animals and walk away.
Yeah. No, I
never shoot anything.
Just walk right past them.
It's like, no, it's all right.
Aren't you a hunter?
Yeah.
All right.
So all that stuff was great. But of course, for me, and we'll get into the specifics of the movie, the huge highlight as a longtime fan of the show was the fact that we got a video visit from a very special Volkswagen bus. And inside that, as soon as I saw the bus, I was very excited. We had Pearl Forrester, a.k.a. Grandma. Bobo, Professor Bobo, the monkey, and
a.k.a. Bobo,
the delightfully named Brain Guy, which, of course, from the Sci-Fi Channel incarnation of MST3K, it's Mary Jo Peele, I think is how you say her name, Kevin Murphy, and Bill Corbett. So getting cast members from the original cast, very exciting. Great to see those characters still traveling together and kind of hanging out. And there was sort of a fun joke about like, well, Forresters never quit. And it's like, well, they kind of always quit, don't they? Yeah. So, and there was just a nice touch with Bobo welcoming TV's son of TV's Frank to the Second Banana Club,
really cute.
Which was great. Some little VR clothes. And then there was the introduction of the clone of Pearl Forrester. Cynthia, who is in the opening of the show. At least I noticed in episode 3, and I forgot to go back. Was she in the opening for episode 1, and I just didn't notice her?
We're going to have to double check.
Yeah, we're going to have to double check that. If anybody noticed that, please let us know. Cool. For sure. In any case, so excited to see them, and it was great.
It was delightful. It just gives this world this world credence, because we were like, oh yeah, it's a reboot or it's a different imagining. Yeah. And, how much are we throwing by the wayside? But we're not. We're building upon it.
At some point, they're going to let us know how Crow and Tom Servo got out of Mike Nelson's apartment and back up into space. But we don't know. Yeah. Also, there's a lot of there are a lot of different models of these 2 robots. So
very true.
But they'll explain it. I mean, I get it. It says in the song, it's just a show. I should really just relax. But I still need to know. I can't relax until you tell me.
You should really relax.
But shame on Netflix for kind of ruining this little surprise, because the title card for the episode, if you don't go from one into the other, if you start episode 2, well, you see Pearl, Bobo, and Brain Guy. And so I was like, not 100% sure, but I was just thinking like, well, I guess that could be a picture from the old version of the show, but I'm not quite sure, because if you go through Netflix, they're actually listed differently. Mystery Science Theater 3000, and this is Mystery Science Theater 3000, The Return. So, but I can't say I'm really going to complain. My friend Jason Blair is in the chat, and Jason has a guess already that these aren't the same Crow and Tom Servo. They're probably just different models. And our comment, and we're going to dive into the movie in a moment, is we said it was charming bad. He said nothing's charming about the guy ripping into that rabbit with Hunt's ketchup, because if he was using Heinz ketchup, that would have been much more civilized.
That's true.
Honestly, I don't know how much rabbit you've eaten, but Heinz 57 actually really brings out the flavor.
I mean, I haven't tried it with Heinz. I just gonna have to do that once I get out of this space.
Hey, Cambot, if you can scroll up a little bit in the chat, because I think there were some other people. Jason kind of bumped everybody up, or maybe it's just Jason in there. Oh yeah, it was me. Anyway, it's great to have him in there. Jason Blair, who was recently a guest on my personal podcast, the Blattcast. You can find that at blattcast.com. Yeah, that's right. Working plugs in. He drove out from Indiana to Los Angeles with 3 triplets.
Wow.
Just to do my podcast.
How many triplets?
3 of them.
Oh.
So 9? No, just 3 kids.
I'm bad at math.
Yeah, me too.
Common Core. There were a lot of Common Core
Yeah,
jokes.
well, yeah, that's
great.
That's not your fault. Oh, there was actually a great, the Bigfoot taught me Common Core.
Yeah,
that was a joke that stood out. As we break down the movie,
I have a laundry list of jokes I love.
Oh, I have some great ones too. I want you to take a moment to objectively try and summarize Cry Wilderness for our listeners who have seen it, of course. Otherwise, they wouldn't be watching this. But maybe they forget. Tell us a little bit about Cry Wilderness.
I'm going to try to make it succinct, so like in one sentence. Boy is visited by Bigfoot and must save Bigfoot and Dad.
Yeah.
Pretty much?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Parentheses, creepy teacher, doesn't believe.
Oh, so much.
Then believes
adamantly.
Yeah, and then gets a visit from Bigfoot, which the lesson learned there is you can be a dick to kids. It's fine.
It's
everything
it all works out.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. You know, Bigfoot comes all the way to wherever his school is. We don't know.
Yeah.
And just shouts at him.
I have a theory because in the beginning we see that Natural History Museum.
Yes.
And I grew up in San Diego, and I happen to know that is the San Diego Natural History Museum. So just a fun little fact. I don't think that the rest of the movie, I didn't really notice anything else in the rest of the movie that was
familiar. It didn't look very San Diego.
It did not. No. But at least that part, the Natural History Museum, is San Diegan.
So we get that, and Bigfoot, goes all the way there. So I guess the Bigfoot there in the museum is somehow him just standing really still.
That part really weirded me out. When we first see the face of the Bigfoot creature, right? And this is a critique on the movie more than the show. But
when we have to critique. We can't critique one without the other.
Of course. When we first see the creature is like the weird mask face that we end up having on the actual Bigfoot. And I was like, oh, why did we make that choice? First of all, how does this museum know what Bigfoot actually looks like?
Yeah.
How do they have an exact replica of this exact Bigfoot's face?
Right.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And the answer is that's the Bigfoot. I mean, Red Hawk had met him, so apparently other people had met him at some point.
I guess so.
But he has a magic amulet.
He posed for a statue.
Can't he possibly just communicate with the magic amulet? Which has some frightening properties, as we see later in the movie, the magic amulet. But I don't know. I was just like, well, he's going to shout out the window, and meanwhile, no one sees Bigfoot, but nobody heard the yelling outside. He
even wakes up the kid to be like, "Kid, look, Bigfoot," and the kid's like, "You're a crazy child."
Yeah.
So this could be like it's all in this child's mind thing.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't he the only one that ever actually sees Bigfoot?
Well, not until the end. Until the end, then Bigfoot shows up for the teacher, and then the dad kind of sees him when he gets rescued from some very threatening looking rocks that were probably very hard to lift.
And I thought that Dad didn't see Bigfoot. He just was like, "Oh, I'm saved somehow."
Oh yeah, maybe you're right. But the teacher does see him at the end, so it's weird that the teacher gets to see him.
I'm just curious now, thinking about it, if maybe it's all in the kid's mind and it's
there was no Bigfoot.
There was never a Bigfoot.
Maybe he just had just a super adrenaline rush and was able to save his dad.
Or has like a Sybil other personality that is Bigfoot.
Maybe this kid is Legion.
I mean, exactly.
It could be Bigfoot. Could be one of the personalities that lives in his head.
It could be.
In any case, let's isolate some of our favorites. For me, my favorite reference in there was just an extended Run DMC It's Tricky rap that was just right there in the middle. That was for me. And then the runner-up.
Oh, I loved that too. Yeah, I also wrote that down. It's tricky.
Yeah, it just kept going. And then there was the runner-up was this movie is about Bigfoot the way that Waiting for Guffman is about Guffman.
Or Godot.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just, that loved those. Do you have a couple of favorites? We can then go through a little bit of a laundry list before we move on to the other movie.
I mean, favorites. Goodness. I'm not high, but my dog is, and I am. I liked that one a lot. The Bobcat and all of the out of focus stuff. I thought all of the out of focus stuff really killed me.
Was pretty great.
They made a joke about building gun forts, and I think the visual of building a fort out of guns really got me.
Yeah.
All of the racist comments in this one.
The racist comments were.
You're just dumb Indian. Whoa!
casual racism just thrown around by a child, no less.
Yeah.
I was a little bit put off, but we're so far removed from the movie that I feel like I can laugh at their racism and insensitivity, and they let us know. Jonah Crow and Tom Servo let us know it's not okay to call someone a dumb Indian,
right?
But he kind of tries to have his comeuppance. Who's a dumb Indian now? He traps him in a little net. Of course, then the kid gets away like 6 more times.
Yeah.
But that's besides the point.
This kid is the king of not listening.
Things I had to look up. That's the other running thing that we do. I had to look up a couple of things. And they're both things that are in the nerd realm, but just not my area of expertise. I had to look up Draco, which is a board game about dragons. So maybe I should have known, but I didn't. And I also had to look up... So I'm fully aware.
The Draco reference.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of what an RPG is, as in terms of a role-playing game, and I know what multiplayer games are, but I didn't understand the abbreviation MMORPG, which I guess is massive multiplayer online. Yeah,
RPG.
So I did not know that specific one. So that one, I was like on a technicality. I'm like, why did I look it up? I should have just reasoned it out.
Oh, that's a joke for my generation.
It was a joke for your generation.
Click.
But I should have.
Done. Yes, Jason says bang
in the chat.
I wrote down bang like 4 times. That got me so many times. Bang. Just
By the way, the funny thing about Jason being the one in the chat is that he's the one who was very well versed in the island of Sodor. So if Jason, if you had been watching last week when Andrew said that was the reference that he just didn't get, you would have been able to let me tell you about the island of Sodor. Man. And our friend Jillian is back.
Welcome back,
Jillian.
Week. And we've also got Ryan Ninja Steel.
How many Mystery Science Theater? What was his question? Where'd he go?
His message was retracted.
He does not want to be given a shout out. It's funny. As I'm reading your message, you retracted it.
Man,
was it retracted or was it redacted by the government? It says
retracted. Yeah, but let's go with redacted.
I think the government.
That's more fun to say. Jason's saying he thought Draco referred to Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter, which is funny because I thought Draco referred to the dragon from Dragonheart.
Wow. So it can be. And that's another great thing about the show. Any one of those could be right. They could have discussed it. They could have discussed it, and it would have been disgusting in the writer's room and been like, oh, people might think all these great.
Yeah.
But the kid looked like Draco Murphy.
Draco Murphy. Yep.
Yeah.
Draco Murphy, the little Irish kid.
Sure. All right. But I still didn't know what it was, and I had to look it up, and apparently I just didn't Google well. So we'll spend a couple quick minutes here just going through some of our favorites.
The one that I had to look up, or the one that I should have looked up. No, actually, I didn't get a chance to look it up, and by didn't get a chance, I mean I forgot. Razdower? Do you know this one? Razdower? At one point they said Razdower.
I don't know if I knew that one.
I'm going to circle it.
Yeah, we're going to have to circle it. Maybe somebody will know.
Maybe someone will know. Razdower.
Yeah.
Jillian? Does Jillian know?
Jillian, you know Razdower?
Jillian?
She's like, me. We love you, Jillian.
Yeah, it's probably not in reference to what I was saying.
No, she's talking about Jillian. But in any case, we love Jillian.
Yes, we do.
So what are a couple of your favorite references?
Man. We had Merry Bigfoot. Like the way he laughed was so funny.
Yeah.
The amulet of eagle blindness or whatever.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
That was just like him. Yeah, it's like, granted this guy wanted to shoot Bigfoot and take him on tour. No, not a great guy. But I mean his eyes are pretty much instantly ripped out by a very, very violent eagle.
Brutally. It's pretty great.
And I don't know. I mean, did the punishment fit the crime there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely not.
Movie, it did not.
I'm so excited because that was such a crazy left turn that it just made this movie gold.
Oh yeah, and
then they rip his eyes out.
Yeah,
wow.
It's like just wait till the end. Read something crazy.
This is biblical.
So the first real joke of the movie was great for me, and this is another one of those ones where I heard a delayed laugh from my wife down the hall. Was that the movie's called Cry Wilderness? And so they're like, okay, wilderness! And it's just, I love the dumb jokes like that make me laugh so much harder than the ones I'm like, I understood that obscure reference.
And I also really, exactly. And I think a lot of the jokes, and I actually don't write these down because I just think that they're so spot. I write some of them down.
Yeah.
Like this one I'm about to share.
I don't write them all. I'd still be watching the episode if I wrote everything down.
Yeah. But the jokes that are when someone finally speaks, like in the beginning we had 3 or 4 minutes of just no dialogue.
Yeah.
And then they're like, when someone finally speaks something, and they said something, and I don't remember what it was, but it was great. And my favorite jokes are just the jokes that are just like them commenting on the situation. It's just so good.
Yeah, no, and I love obscure stuff. You know, like Paul's bunkmate is Powder, which is this movie, this really pale kid, and then just jokes about the name Paul. Paul, I loved your first letter to the Corinthians, and Paul is dead. Check the album cover. And
I
there were
like
just
that
a
one
lot
too.
of those early on, and when we first see that Bigfoot's outside, one of the guys yells "Sweetums," which is that giant Muppet monster.
Muppet.
But
Yeah.
anyway, so
Oh,
yeah,
I loved the public domain animal sounds. I loved
yeah.
that guy when ran into the bikers on top of the mountain for no reason. More ways. That guy needs more ways to cover his face. He's only got an eye patch, a beard, and a bandana. Like,
Yeah.
I loved that. Oh gosh, what were the other ones? The focus jokes again.
I love jokes about product placement, which they did really well with refreshing Coca-Cola.
Yeah,
which
the Pepsi jokes
I
they
thought
made.
that was very funny.
He
Yeah.
hated Pepsi.
And also the joke that Bigfoot's favorite music is royalty-free rock and roll music,
Yeah.
which was very nice.
That was really funny.
Yeah.
Y'all
Another
Yeti
great
for
one.
this? That one was good.
A joke that was obscure, say, in the original run of this show was when they get off in the woods and they say it's the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk,
Yeah.
which is really only seen in the Star Wars Holiday Special, which now anyone can see. But at one point, it was very like I had a $20 bill in my wallet, which I handed to a man for a bootleg video cassette at a comic book convention in New York City in like 1993. Money that I still believe, I contend, was very well spent because I got decades of enjoyment out of it before it was on the internet and anybody could watch it.
With you.
So I love that sort of the niche of this show works so much better now because people you just can find out about anything, and people are much more aware of delightful entertainment like the Star Wars Holiday Special, which was great. We'll go with a couple more. Anything jump out for you?
The last thing I want to mention is just that Patton singing at the end. That was great.
I did.
I enjoyed it.
I definitely liked that. I liked the joke, sort of a fun, changing with the times joke. Hey, Jonah, what's a radio? And Jonah says, it's like a podcast you can't control, which I thought was very funny. And a great comic book reference. He's a mint in bag A+ condition. So that was like a very inside comic book joke. But anyway, we then get to move on to episode 1102. And please let us know your favorite. Oh, they referred to him as a cheap Chris Elliott at one point, which was great. So please let us know in the chat. Yes, you're right, 1103. Yes. My notes
so if you guys haven't watched 1103,
this is your time to turn off the show.
Pause the video.
Yeah, go watch it and then come back.
Go watch it.
Or, we're going to give away some jokes and some stuff. But
we're basically going to recap the whole thing.
Yeah, we're going to act it out.
We're going to act it out.
Scene. Yeah, I'm going to act out the show opening. Now,
I'm Tom Servo.
That was a great Tom Servo.
Oh, thanks.
His voice has changed somewhat over the years. That can be the next one.
Sweet.
So,
Finally, my calling.
So, episode 1103, The Time Travelers.
The Time Travelers.
Oh, and we will get to the movie.
There was so much about this movie that I thought was actually kind of good, and then so much about
the problem.
that I thought was
is
really
that
bad.
So, it doesn't have great effects, but they spent some money on it. And some of the most endearing movies from this show are the ones that they spent almost no money on. So they spent a little, and that made it, little bit less enjoyable. It's not like, oh, Trainwreck, I like to look. It's like, oh, it's just it's very half-assed.
Yeah.
I like, a movie that is fully assed or not assed at all.
I was really impressed by this script too, because it kept me not only really surprised with how advanced and modern the idea, the scientific ideas were, but it was very, it was great. It was like a clearly, I don't want to say this. I don't want to say this as a precursor to things, but you could see influences from that movie in things that I've seen, like in Futurama episodes or in Rick and Morty episodes.
Yeah, and I mean, just the whole concept of the transporter. I mean, this certainly predates Star Trek. So there's a lot of things in here. You're like, oh yeah, I think a lot of people have seen this movie. And it's funny because it's not like a seminal, well-known movie. The Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie that they did was This Island Earth, which is very well-known. This is not on that level, but I feel like a lot of people saw this as well as that. And this just wasn't as good a movie.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people saw it. So let's talk about the host segments in that episode.
Yes.
There was actually a kind of a great reference early in the Invention Exchange when Jonah referred to Kinga and Max as Celino and Barnes, the injury attorneys. That was another one where
they just said Celino and Barnes too. They didn't even say the injury attorneys. Our brains are putting that
Burns,
in there.
Yeah, and then it's
really
like,
funny.
oh, I knew the theme song, and I actually thought that was a local thing, but it's actually they're like a national.
Wow.
Yeah, so I thought it was like I'm like, wow, that's just a local reference.
Yeah.
But you definitely get some local references. It's just in the old version of the show they were usually like Minnesota things.
Yeah, they got me though.
Yeah,
totally
but that definitely got me. And the afterlife alert was what the Mads had, which I thought was very funny, and then the edible, the silica packet, sort of a very interesting concept, and it turns out that none of them were actually edible, but that was all right. And then in a following host segment, we got the time portal safety drill, which of course asks important questions about a time portal to 1920 Chicago, which anyone who enjoys sci-fi needs to answer those questions. Dinosaurs through a time portal. In another host segment, we got to meet some robots, some new robots, Fixie and Slappy, and another one.
That was so fun.
Yeah.
And they just destroy all of them.
But my favorite host segment, we got a visit from a couple characters from the movie.
Yes.
We got Dr. Varno and Larry. Larry, of course, performed by original Mystery Science Theater 3000 host Joel Hodgson, did not speak. But this was one of those things that I always loved about the show, is when characters from the movie would come on by and visit. One of my favorites was, before he was the host, Michael J. Nelson as the amazing Colossal Man. And he just had on like a bad bald cap, and he just kind of checked in with everybody. So that was great. And I loved at the end that they acknowledged that this was the 200th episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And then,
that they had nothing to do with.
Yeah, Max is like, this is really only our
episodes.
third. I thought that was actually very funny to talk
loved
about
it
it
too,
in both ways. And, they had a cake to celebrate with, but it was not the money bag cake. So,
So, I mean,
Yeah.
win some, lose some.
All right. So we got all that out. So you enjoyed all those. Did you have any notes on the host segments before we move into the movie?
I didn't. I really enjoyed them. I thought at the end of the Larry bit, I wondered I'm glad you told me that was Joel Hodgson, because I didn't recognize him.
Well, he
in
looks
the
a lot
makeup.
different. He doesn't have hair anymore, really, but he had a sweet wig.
He did. He did have a sweet wig.
If I were Joel, I would have worn that thing home and just been
kept on going.
Yeah, and said to the wife and kids, like, this is me now.
Yeah.
Like, you get used to this. I'm
Say hello to new daddy.
Yeah, this is new daddy. This is Larry. So I'm looking forward to getting more of that in future episodes.
Yeah.
All
I feel
right.
like this was a harder to watch.
This was
movie.
definitely harder to watch, and we were talking a little bit beforehand, which breaks all rules of show business. Save it for the air, kid. But we had to talk a little bit about it. So talk about the movie and why you have a bigger problem with this movie than you did with Cry Wilderness.
So I was really impressed with like I said, the script I thought that was really interesting and really compelling. Scientifically, it was like, oh, cool. Like it's about time travel and about a portal to the future and about how if you were to try to come back and like how all that works, and if you overshot that, and like, oh my goodness, and a future of exclusivity where we have like very few with resources, and then the ones with, and then there was also like there's so much to it. It's a really solid sci-fi story, because it seems like it was revealed in the end that the like mutants are just people that are just trying to make it too, but like without the resources that these people have.
And we sort of get to see this android army that they're building. I mean, there's
Super
themes,
creepy.
as we were saying a few minutes ago, there's themes that really prevail through so much of sci-fi. I mean, better done than this, but very interesting that's kind of the point, that people are just people. When the one female scientist character runs into the mutant in the tunnels, everybody's first reaction is, well, we have to shoot him.
I know.
And she's like, no. And as we were talking about, they acknowledged that this was actually someone who was physically handicapped. And, and they made a joke out of like, we're acknowledging it. We've acknowledged that we've acknowledged it. It was very funny, but it's also
casting
like
the physical disability guy as the mutant is not exactly.
Even now, that doesn't happen though, So it's, it was like, this guy was probably like, I can't believe I'm in a movie.
Yeah.
I don't talk. Everyone wants to kill me. I don't get seen again, but that's all right.
Yeah.
It's kind of a very important moment.
As an actor, he was probably really jazzed.
Yeah.
But for what it represents for his community, it's maybe not as favorable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like if a little person gets cast in a movie, but then there's dwarf tossing. It's like, well, I'm in a movie, but am I really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there were definitely a lot of things in there. It was interesting though, because this movie is called The Time Travelers. And yes, There's a little bit of time travel in the beginning, a little bit at the end, but the rest of it, it's like they're just on another planet, basically. I know they're in the future, but it seems like this actually felt like an episode of Star Trek Voyager. Anybody who knows me knows why I said Star Trek Voyager as opposed to one of the good versions of Star Trek. But yeah, that's right. That's a zing, Captain Janeway. Take that. But you know, it was just like all right, it's a sci-fi story that they added a little bit of time travel element, but you know, it's very easily you beam down to this planet and you run into this problem, and then you know, then you jump into some time travel.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know if I video game people watching, but it really reminded me of a Fallout, the Fallout series of video games, which are basically set in like, oh, there's a nuclear apocalypse, so like 70 years later, 100 years later.
I actually know what it is, but I'm going to play up the old guy thing. Andrew, what's a fallout?
Oh, well, when people are afraid of nuclear fallout, basically, they built these shelters. And anyway, so
I like how you turned into an Adam Sandler grandma character there.
Well, little girl, I'll tell you all about it. Yeah, exactly. I grew up on Adam Sandler. It's hardwired in my code.
Did, yeah.
Yeah. I thought that. I thought that the script was really solid. I thought the movie itself, like the decision to cast that guy as a mutant.
Yeah.
The decision to, like, in the beginning, all of them were like along one wall, and there was a lot of like just nothing on the right side of the screen. Like a lot of the direction decisions just seemed weird.
Were they decisions,
right?
Or just negligence?
Negligence.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, negligent directing.
Yeah.
Well, we have to address the comic relief character, the
Danny.
elephant in the room, Danny.
Oh, he was an elephant too. I did not like Danny.
Reptilicus had this too, you know, with the guy who puts his hand in the electric eel.
Yeah.
Why do so many of these movies and so many of these Mystery Science Theater 3000 movies have this character? Why do we have this guy? So that, you know, he's there for comic relief. But he's not funny.
Nope.
And look, he gets a little something. So, you know, good for Danny.
Gosh, and
but talk about the single worst moment.
The single worst moment was that moment where he, like, okay, so he flirts with her. Great. He gets like, she's immediately like, yeah, you want to come up to my room? Like, basically, it was just like, whoa.
In the future, ladies are lazy.
Right. And I thought there was parts of that scene, especially from her end, that were like really cute and well acted and like, good job. You did what you could with what you got. But then he like has the eyes and he like looks up to camera and it's this really strange angle straight on him, and like things are almost out of focus. It's almost like a fisheye lens where he like, you kind of look up from the eyes to him and he goes, I was giving her the eye, but it turns out the other way around, or whatever. It's like he seems like one of those dinosaurs in the Flintstones. That's like, it's a living. Like, it's
right, exactly
the wrong tone.
It's completely the wrong tone, and it's weird. And this is what we were saying before. When movies have that moment where they break the fourth wall because they can't resist, basically for one joke, and it's like, well, you just threw away the whole movie, which, you know, granted, not a great movie, but for a bad joke.
But I like had suspended my disbelief for you guys. Come on.
I was really invested in Danny's relationship. I'm gonna admit, but
I was actually kind of invested in it too. I hated him for being like, yeah, well, I got a girlfriend, and I'm.
Well, he was trying to let her down easy.
I guess, but like, why?
She's really tall.
Why not just take? Yeah, exactly.
He's
like insinuating that
and she's really quick, not like you.
You see the flashes in her eyes or whatever. I just wanted him to take her away. He's dumb. Like, why wouldn't he? Like, does he really have any like knowledge?
Yeah, what does he need to get back for? Or like I don't know.
I kind of liked the idea that he was just hitting it and quitting it or whatever the idea was.
That was the joke.
I thought it would have been more fun if he was just like, I don't understand the way that time works. Come on with me, future lady. Yeah, I felt like that would have been more his character.
Yeah,
and cuter.
Well, let's talk about some of our favorite moments.
Yes,
now, for me,
some of the jokes.
Huge shout out to jokes from the old show. There were two jokes that were. One of them was a recurring joke that Crow would often say in movies. How about a little fire, Scarecrow, which he did in a lot of the old episodes. And then there's like a very, like, for fans of the show, it's a very memorable episode. It's actually my favorite. Pod People, where there's a musical performance, and at the very end of it, one of the guys says, "It stinks." So they did that after she plays the little like weird Simon computer keyboard thing.
Yes.
And there were two references to old jokes, which it's like, you know, it's very meta to make a reference to your own show.
Yourself, yeah.
But that's all right. I'm okay with that. And I love that.
They found their audience.
Yeah. Well, they know. I mean, if you're watching this, it's like, you know, I mean, a lot of people. You know, you were able to just sort of go back into the well and watch the show from various sources, old episodes. They're all out there. There's a lot of legitimate releases and some that are from round out there.
Yeah, and the ether.
Some of the tapes are still circulating, let's just say. Yeah. But what are some of your favorite moments?
Oh, man, I had a lot of really fun moments. Let's see. I'll just start at the top. I really loved the astounding time is fleeting. The
Yeah,
whole Rocky Horror
there
references.
were a couple of time warp. There was like early, there was that one, and then there was another one again.
Yeah.
It's like just a jump to the left a little bit later in the movie. Yeah.
The Dick Dastardly references
Yes.
from Wacky Races. I
Love
love that. I love that they mentioned that we all hate Danny. Like we all hate
We
Danny.
all hated Danny.
Yeah.
Everybody, everyone in the movie hated Danny, except God loved that one girl.
Yeah.
She legitimately
only one.
loved Danny. Everyone else in time and space hated him.
Yeah.
But not that girl.
I loved the Spaceman joke, Dr. Spaceman.
Yeah, Dr.
From
Spaceman.
30 Rock.
Yeah.
The Bechdel test. They get a 0 on the Bechdel test. That was great. The Blantastic Four I thought was really funny. Just the whole of Rena and Danny's relationship I thought was really funny and silly and dumb.
Yeah.
Kicked out all of the they've been kicked out of all of the Denny's in the galaxy. I thought it was really funny when they came to visit
because
the
that,
two.
Yeah, that was very funny. There's we'll get to that I guess after my references. But yeah, there's this very weird sexual vibe happening down there, and they make jokes about key parties. And there was some good stuff. My favorite obscure references, I had two. One was if Rutger Hauer, who most people know who he is, because if you watch Mystery Science Theater 3000, I can't imagine you haven't seen Blade Runner, had a baby with Susan Powder. Now that's an obscure reference in this day and age because she had a series of books called Stop the Insanity, and she's a scary looking lady, but anybody who watched Mystery Science Theater on TV in the 90s, those commercials were on all the time. So it's almost like we knew.
I missed Susan Powder, but I totally knew Rutger Hauer.
Right, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, but it was the idea that they would have a very frightening child. And then another one, it's such a niche reference to the MTV sketch show The State, which... had some great, if just anybody who's not familiar with The State, you look up the people who were on it: Michael Ian Black, Thomas Lennon, lots of people from Reno 911, and just if you see who they are, you're like, oh yeah, that whole cast I've seen in other things. And so there was a reference to this character Doug. That Michael Showalter was his name played, and Doug would end the scenes like he was just this like really broad teenage character. He's like, hey man, I'm out of here. And they did that at one of the scenes. I think it was actually Danny who left. And I'm like, all right, I like that.
Love it.
Yeah. So, again, you got to go really deep and really over-explain it. And that's the kind of reference that I like.
Those deep cuts.
Thing I had to look up was a little sciencey for me. So I'd heard of Kepler 186f before, but I had to look it up. That's the first Earth-sized planet in the habitable zone, according to NASA.
I appreciate you looking it up. That's also what I wrote down.
Yeah, because I'm like, all right, I got to look up the science stuff. Yeah. I also appreciated that I.B. Melchior was involved in this movie in addition to Reptilicus.
Yeah.
It was seen there. But anyway, so what did you... So was that the one thing you had to look up?
That was the one thing I had to look up, and you totally got it for me.
Real science nerds are like, no, what is with these guys?
Oh, you guys are dumb.
Look, some of us come to this show for the mystery, some for the science.
Yeah.
Me, I'm all about the theater.
Exactly. I have two more things I want to mention
Yeah,
real
please.
quick.
Oh, no, yeah.
But I thought this was really fun. The last two things, I loved Tom pushing the rocket upright.
Yeah.
It lasted way too long. It was way too fun.
But yeah,
it got me.
The idea that they can have Tom Servo fly now and he floats up there, and I love the back and forth, the like sibling rivalry between Tom and Crow.
Yeah.
Which is like, because it's a play on the old, you've never given up on anything before in your life. Now, instead he's like, I've never had faith in you ever.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, do it to show me wrong. And the fact that they did it so long and that they pushed it up, that was actually a great moment. I really enjoyed that. And I like them moving around the theater, going up in the movie. They did
and like you mentioned, them putting on the costumes. Like I think a little bits like that.
They did it a little bit early in the series, and they would do like Batman sound effects. They would hold up during fight scenes like pow and zang. But it's hard. It was very hard with that technology to have it read very well on the screen.
Right.
So now that we live in the future, we're able to actually see stuff like that.
So much more.
So that was great. Did you have another?
My very last reference that I just thought was just for me was just when they're like, the elves are sailing for Valinor now that Sauron has been defeated. It's like, yep, love it.
Like, yep. Yeah. There were definitely a lot of jokes that were great, but let's talk about what we alluded to. Just the weird sexuality in the future.
Yeah.
And
I kind of get it. Like, I like one of the things that I thought, like, I kind of saw referenced in this, or at least in my brain, was like, oh, like this is like a post Zardoz movie where, like, oh yeah, like It's a sexual future.
Right, but you know,
You saw those low cuts.
Yeah, there's that awkward like tanning scene though, and it's just
with the like bars.
Yeah,
I love that they were like, oh, if any a good thing, all the women in this time period are the same height.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there was just a lot of that, and you know, it was just like a whole scene. So that's why when we got the visit from the doctor and Larry, you know, Joel, and I actually don't know who played the other character. It's not somebody I recognize. But anyway, when we had that host segment, that was great because it's definitely like a great way to comment on. Yeah, there's a lot of like really
they're
like
kind of swingers.
Yeah, and you know, planets swing. You know, if only James T. Kirk had beamed down to this planet.
Yeah, exactly.
He would not have ever beamed back up. Probably if I had to guess.
But we'd watch that spinoff. Wouldn't be on any channel.
Shatner's writing it right now. He's like, I could still do it even though I'm 86.
Still time.
I believe it was Crow did a C-3PO impression during this episode.
Yes, he did several times.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh man, I could probably listen to that all day. Yeah, I was like, maybe Crow wants to go ahead and redub all the Star Wars movies.
That'd
just do all the C-3PO lines.
I'd listen to a Crow C-3PO like.
Oh,
yeah.
C-3P Crow.
Oh!
Thank you. Yeah. It's got very quiet there in the chat if anybody wants to throw some of their favorite moments. I know that some people only watched 11:02, so now we've run into that problem. And
everyone left the chat because they're like, we haven't seen it yet.
But
they're all watching
We'll let everybody know now that next week we will do 11:04. I don't know what the movie is. And 11:05. Also don't know what the movie is. So make sure that between now and next Friday, you watch both of those episodes.
Yeah, give them a little look-see.
And you can always let us know your favorites from any of the previous episodes. Just don't tell us about future episodes because I'm restraining myself and not staying up all day Friday and watching all of it. It is not easy. So in any case, I think that look, I have a million jokes I could read off, but I'm gonna focus on the one that we talked about outside though, which was another like running gag, which was the shipping crate of the future.
Of the future.
Straw of the future. And again, that's another one. Went on like 3 jokes too long, but then that's 3 jokes where I'm laughing harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why my parents hated the show because I'd be sitting there laughing so hard and it's just like, he's just saying the same thing. It's like they're talking over the movie. I'm like, well, that's the point.
That's the fun.
Yeah, that's the fun.
Oh, there was one joke early on I want to mention too where he just goes, look what we did. Look at it. Like it was just too good.
I wrote this one in bold, which means I really needed to get it in there. I'm a big fan of jokes about Penthouse Forum. So it said, "Dear Time Traveler Forum, I always read your column, but I never thought it would happen to me."
Yep. The girl starts coming on to him.
Right, exactly. I once, little side anecdote before we tie the show up. I took a creative writing class in college, and the instructor told us about some of his background, some of the things that he'd written, and he said, I used to write the letters for Penthouse Forum, and this was like an instant reaction. It was like a gut reaction, completely legitimate. I didn't have any kind of self-censor. He said, I used to write the letters for Penthouse Forum, and I'm immediately like, I knew it! I knew that they were fake. And I was like, okay, sorry, everyone. But, they were just too good.
I've read them all several times.
I have bound copies of Penthouse Forum. In any case, look, this was so much fun to talk about. I love talking MST3K.
Me too.
So great to get to do it with my friend Andrew here.
So great to do it with my friend Christian.
Please interact with us on the interwebs at Christian DMZ, at Andrew Mena. And don't forget the show. We're almost up to 10 followers at MST3K ABTV.
You could be the lucky number 11.
And by the way, you can also email us your questions and comments. I opened up an email address, mst3kabtv@gmail.com.
If you have emails, thoughts, questions, concerns, threats, or bribes,
send them our way, and we will see you next Friday for 11:04 and 11:05. But for Andrew Mena, I'm Christian Bladt. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And the only thing left to do, push the button, Andrew.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.